It was probably the 2018 Netroots Nation, and
closed in 2019, so maybe 2018.
Okay, and there were protests about the closing of this Philadelphia hospital, Hahnemann Hospital. And I think at the time, maybe we may have done an interview or two about this Pennsylvania hospital network, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, has a massive hospital network in Pennsylvania. And the SEIU, in conjunction, I guess, with a strategic organizing center, have sued, or at least petitioned the, I should say, they have filed an antitrust complaint with the Department of Justice against this hospital network. And we've talked about this in the past, but it's a word that I certainly didn't hear much of, prior to several years ago in talking to people who are involved in antitrust. Their argument is that the UPMC hospital network has what is called a monopsony. And a monopsony is like, it's the sort of flip side of a monopoly. So a monopsony is when it's usually an employer, has no competition to purchase labor. So monopoly may be when you control all of the supply, essentially, that you're selling. In this instance, a monopsony basically controls all the supply of what you're purchasing. And so you see monopsony in an issue like Walmart coming in and buying all the chickens and forcing a chicken producer to do certain things that they don't want to necessarily do because they have all of the buying power.
We saw this also within the context of the regional monopsonies of those freight rail companies, essentially, right? Would that be a good example?
Well, they have monopolies in that they're the only one providing the service.
Okay.
A monopsony really has to do with your buying power. And in this instance, what they're buying is labor. And it's not just broadly labor, right? I mean, if you're going to work at a hospital, you've got to there's certain limitations to where you can work. You're a nurse, or you're an anesthesiologist, or all the things in a hospital. And so the SEIU filed this complaint. And it is based upon apparently recent research about the impact of corporate consolidation on workers. This is from a piece written by Luke Goldstein in the American Prospect. The complaint argues that UPMC wields power over workers not only to suppress wages, but also to restrict job mobility through non-compete agreements and illegally crush collective bargaining efforts. It also, this complaint, unearths previously unreported details about a do not hire blacklist used by UPMC, which punishes employees who had to temporarily leave their jobs and dissuading many others from ever quitting despite brutal working conditions. So the DOJ's got to decide whether it's going to take up the complaint. And this authority to deal with monopsony, apparently there hasn't been any sort of action taken on monopsony, particularly in terms of labor, for decades. Remember, there was a massive shift under the Reagan administration on both the philosophical approach to antitrust and the sort of material approach to it. The philosophical change happened and was largely a part of Robert Bork, Chicago University type of economics and law, saying that whereas we used to enforce monopoly, all the laws are on the books. We used to enforce anti-monopoly laws by assessing whether a power in the marketplace was not just bad for the consumer, that was one element of it, but also bad for competition, keeping in mind the other sellers of a product, let's say, and also bad for democracy, because concentration of economic power invariably ends up being concentration of political power. It's even more so, I think, in the wake of all the Supreme Court decisions we've seen over the years and increase in other elements of wealth inequality. So there used to be those three broad elements in assessing whether a monopoly was bad. Reagan basically said, we're just going to look at it from the context of a consumer in that moment. This also goes, in terms of assessing, should these two companies merge? Should one be allowed to acquire the other? And they just said, well, if it lowers the price, really short term, they say it's not a problematic monopoly. And that also impacted the sort of Justice Department's aggressiveness towards monopsonies. And the Biden administration, to its credit, and there's not a lot of times I necessarily say that, but the antitrust has been a very, very important development under the Biden administration, where they have really basically hired people who are aggressively going. So it's going to be interesting to see if this happens, because this is would be a serious sort of linchpin in changing our government's perspective towards monopsony. So just wanted to highlight that. We'll do a deeper dive into it in the coming weeks.
Someone's got to make a board game, otherwise people aren't going to take it seriously.
Actually, it's not a bad idea.
It's
not a bad idea at all.
If you make it shorter than Monopoly, I might be in for it.
And the goal is for you to to become a kingpin so you can suppress wages.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's actually that's what Monopoly was supposed to be.
Yeah.
The game Monopoly was a trust-busting sentiment underlying it. That's actually a great idea. Maybe we'll
check out the merch store.
Split it out. Yeah. We should do that. We'll sell it in the merch store.
There's a ton of different versions of Monopoly that you can just get, right? It can be Game of Thrones themed or Harry Potter themed. There's no way it can't be
I think the Monopsony
antitrust themed.
But Monopsony is different. Monopsony would be different because you have to change it. You get little workers. I don't know. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, we'll figure it out.
With no other option but to serve you or starve.
Exactly.
Fun.
It sounds fun.
Fun for the whole family.
Oh, you go to debtor's prison.
Yeah, we'll front you the cost of this housing.
Do not collect health insurance. Go directly to jail.